Hello, I'm here with Brad Lewis from O'Fallon, Illinois, and Clint Benish from St. Jacob, Illinois. My name is Tim Price, and we're going to chit chat today for a little bit about worship leaders and really specifically churches hiring a worship leader. And so that's where Brad is at with his church, and we just thought it'd be fun to see how it's going and dig in a little bit and see what comes from this conversation that might be helpful for a church or a worship leader. So tell us where you're at. Actually, before we get into the process of that, just introduce a nutshell of your life there, Brad.
For sure. I am the associate pastor at O'Fallon First Methodist Church. I've been there for, I guess, going on 9 years now. So been there a little while. I am married. I actually married my high school sweetheart. We have 2 kids, and we love living in O'Fallon and being connected where we are, and just being involved in the community here. So it's a great place for us, and we find unique ways to serve throughout the community. A lot of different things happening for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. And me and Clint, we've already been on these podcasts, so we don't have to say too much. And since me, Clint, and Brad, all of us here on this little video meet together on various occasions, it's good to catch up either way. But one thing about Brad that I've always thought is unique, and that is that before he was on staff as a youth pastor / family pastor / I'm not sure what all you do, you were the custodian at the church way back when, before you ever came back to serve in that role. So
It's
I always thought that was a good combination.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that God played it out for sure. It's a unique one. I don't think a lot of people can say that they're pastoring at a church that they served as the custodian to pay their way through college. So it's kind of cool.
Is that counted in the 9 years?
It's not counted in the 9 years. I think if you count that, it'd probably be 12 years, I guess.
That's good.
That's awesome.
All right. So now back to the framework question. Where are you at in this process of your church looking for a worship leader? What's the process been looking like?
So it's been a lengthy process for us, for sure. We found out back in, I guess, late December, early January, that our current worship leader was going to resign his position and seek other employment, in particular to try to get closer to his family. And so we knew all the way back in January that this was coming up, but we also wanted to work with him and give him some time to get on his feet and find a new job. And thankfully for him, he starts at a new church in California this week, which is about 40 minutes away from his wife's parents, which is exactly what they wanted. So we're extremely happy for them, but it's been interesting for us having to go through that long of a process and wanting to make sure we honored him and honored God in the process and still employed him. So we delayed our search process a little bit, and we've been in that search process now, I guess, 2 months or so. We didn't really publicize anything because we really wanted to narrow down what we were looking for. And I guess a little over a week ago, we finally got some literature out, some job descriptions, and some online application stuff set up. And since then, we've had about six or eight resumes come through. So it's going slow, but it's going for sure.
So it's impossible probably to boil this down, but what's the general role that person would play?
For sure. So we have, like some other congregations, we have a contemporary service and we have a traditional service. And so we want someone who can help lead in both settings and in both situations, but we really want somebody who has a heart and a passion for contemporary worship. We want somebody who can help us take steps forward in a direction we've been going, but hopefully somebody that has a unique skill set that can help even guide and navigate us in maybe some new ways and bring some new life and blood into that ministry specifically. And then also in our unique times, we've learned that we need to have somebody in that role that has skills in audiovisual stuff, being able to maybe even do some worship design stuff that can be translated via internet, YouTube, Zoom, whatever the case may be, whatever platforms we're on, we really want somebody that has some proficiencies there and can help share those gifts with us in that way.
Yeah, because I remember reflecting on the fact that back in the 90s, it was like youth and children were together in terms of
Mm-hmm.
ministry roles. And then somewhere along the way, it started becoming like worship and youth. And then somewhere along the way, it started becoming youth and video.
Yeah.
And then in recent years, it was like worship and video.
Yeah.
Like if you couldn't do a little bit of each, then it was tough to, even if you weren't in charge of all of it, it was tough to even to work with.
Yeah. And another big piece for us is we want somebody who can just be a team member. That's a big part for us is we try to function as a team. And like you said, there are plenty of times where I've had to wear the hat of the audio visual person because I'm one of the younger people on staff or whatever the case may be. But we're seeing now, I think more and more in the church that part of our worship experiences are technologically based. And so we want to make sure that there's somebody out there that can help us bring that to the next level as well.
Yep. That's true. So don't let me forget this question, but maybe we could just ask it now. But if you find somebody, what do you think about roping people in during this season of not really meeting in person?
It's a weird process. I don't even know what to think really because we're at this limbo point now where you can kind of start doing some stuff at your church again, but you really can't still meet, and it's this weird situation. So I can't imagine how it's going to be for somebody new coming in and not even really getting to meet the congregation for a while, not even really getting to meet the staff for a while. I mean, there will be some interaction and some things that happen for sure, but it's not going to be like a normal day where you come in and you have an office right down the hall where you can, if you have questions or you need something, that everybody's going to be right there all the time. And so I can't imagine what it's going to be like for them. And trying to integrate somebody into a team that you don't get to interact with all the time, it's going to be difficult as well.
Yep. That's true.
One of the questions that I actually had, and it kind of like, you kind of spoke on it a little bit, is, when I have tried, when I've auditioned or whatever you want to call it, to be like a worship leader somewhere, one of the key portions of that was to like actually go and like play with the praise team that's already there and like meet those members, and as you said, right now we can't really like meet and do those kind of things. So how are you guys handling that aspect of like seeing how they gel with the team, how the team responds, and like just that kind of interaction? Because like in my past experience, like a lot of the energy that's there is, based on like how well they gel. You know what I mean? So have you guys talked about that at all, or what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, we
That's a
have
good
talked
question.
about that, and I think that's a great question to really think through. In our conversations about it, we've talked about the first steps will be probably a lot like this, a lot like we're doing right now and meeting online. But our plan is before we hire anyone, we will have them come in and interact with the band and play and make those connections, hopefully provide a meal and let each other just sit down and pick each other's brains and all that kind of stuff. Because like you said, we think that that's a hugely important part of this process, and you need to make sure that people gel and can interact with each other. And it's going to be interesting to see how we do that, because there's so many blockades that kind of in the way right now, but I think it can be done. And we are seeing more and more churches that are putting full bands together and just spreading them out all over the stage. And again, that's not necessarily how it's always going to be set up, but I think you can still learn from that experience. And so our goal is to set something like that up for sure with whoever we want to hire.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and really everything right now is filtered through COVID and the shelter in place and all that stuff.
Maybe we should have like started with the caveat of letting people know what's going on now. So if they come back in a year, like, why are they talking about this?
If they listen to it, I don't know. I think everybody is gonna know.
They're gonna remember.
Yeah, hopefully. Who knows? But what are the challenges though, outside basically of not being able to meet? What have been the challenges of trying to actually get to the point that you're at now?
Well, there's been a lot of challenges, really. It's before, so our worship leader that's on his way out, he's been with us for 3 years. And I think he kind of knew it was going to be a shorter stop like that, in particular because our worship leader that was there before him was there for over 30 years. And so it's so hard to have a long tenured person followed by another long tenured person. And so I think he kind of knew it was a transition spot for him. And so with knowing that, with understanding that, it's been harder to, I guess, get some of the things like the technological side of worship. We haven't had as much time to really focus on that. And I know 3 years is a long time in some instances, but really to change out some of the equipment that we have and all that really takes some time to figure out all your equipment in the first place and then to start changing it out and all that. So not being able to do that over the last few years has been tough. And then trying to find somebody that can help us with that, I think is going to be tough as well. And then the other thing that I've noticed right away in this process is the idea for somebody to step in and primarily be a contemporary worship leader, but still have some responsibilities on a traditional setting is an obstacle. And I don't think every church offers traditional and contemporary worship options. And so we're unique in that sense. And I know there's a few others. I know, for example, Troy, you guys offer a traditional and a contemporary, but it's kind of a unique area to be in. And so to find someone who can lead a contemporary praise team, but then also help facilitate a traditional service is something that was difficult trying to navigate even when putting a job description together.
Do you guys have I'm just kind of curious of what you have there because I've actually never been and attended there. But do you guys have like the full, like when I think of traditional, I think of like a choir and organ and like bells and stuff like that from occasion. Do you guys do all that kind of stuff?
We do. We have anything that you think of as traditional, we probably have it. I mean, we have a choir that wears robes and we sing all the hymns. We sing out of the hymnals. We have an organist that has also been there for about 30 years and is a phenomenal organist. And it's a really cool experience. So it's definitely a traditional service. And then you flip the switch, and after that we have our contemporary service, which is a full-on contemporary service. I mean, we roll out the platform with the drum set and get all the amps and guitars and all the different microphones and all that kind of stuff set up. And so it's unique for sure. So and it's in the same space.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What is the schedule when we're not in the middle of the coronavirus?
So we have an 8:30 traditional service and a 10:45 contemporary service. And you really kind of need that time block in the middle to transition from the space from one to the other, because you have to break down the chairs from the choir and set up all the stuff for the band.
So it used to be you had church in the other part of the building.
We did. We used to have our traditional service in our sanctuary, and we had our contemporary service in our gym. But we wanted to try to integrate everybody into the sanctuary space and kind of navigate that and see what it looks like. And we have, I know, well, Tim, I think you've probably been there. I don't know if you have, Clint. We have a beautiful sanctuary, and we want to make sure it gets utilized to its fullest capacity. And so that's one of the ways that we've worked to do that. But again, like we're talking, it's created a unique situation for sure. And I will say our gym space is actually still used for contemporary worship in a sense, because we have a student praise team, and they do their worship in the gym still. So we have a stage set up and a whole drum set, and we have all the equipment down there as well.
So, yeah, Clint, if you think any more questions, those are good. Thinking that phrase, but what sort of stuff is there another music leader that leads in the traditional worship, or what kind of crossover is there that the person you're looking for is doing?
So the primary role in the traditional service is just going to be helping to order the service. Putting together the liturgy and things like that, which as the pastors, we kind of already do that as well. But their responsibility will be to help find a song leader, to help pick out the hymns for the week and things like that. So it's not necessarily a ton of actually leading during that specific service, because we try to have a different song leader in our traditional service almost every week. And so from that standpoint, it's not actually a whole lot of upfront leading, I guess, in that traditional service.
So who schedules the tech team then? Is that something the worship leader would be doing, overseeing a tech ministry, volunteers?
Yeah, the worship leader will schedule and kind of work with the tech team in a variety of different ways. And we have a pretty good tech staff already, and it's just a matter of getting them together. And they have, the cool thing about them is they have a lot of ideas. We just didn't always have the time or the capacity to tap into those ideas. Our hope is that with a new person in that role, we'll have some of that time and have some of that flexibility to really focus on some of the things that they've brought to the table.
So what are a couple of the traits? I know you mentioned team player and stuff like that, but when you just think about it, or when you and your pastor think about worship leaders, what are a couple of the traits that you just think would be great to have?
So for me, when I think about a worship leader, I think a lot of people think about a great musician. Like, we all want a great musician, right? We want somebody who can sing and play some kind of instrument, guitar or keys or something. And I think that's hugely important. I do think that's an important trait for a worship leader. But I want somebody, when I think about traits for a worship leader, I want somebody who can be active in leading that worship experience, somebody that will take on some of the responsibilities in prayer and potential of, if we're doing any kind of liturgy in that service, any of those things, working on transitions, somebody that's willing to help in transition times and all those little things that we I think a lot of times, and you guys both know this because you are worship leaders, but we think of worship leaders as performers, but it's a lot more than that. And so that's kind of what we're trying to steer away from, is somebody who is a great performer, but doesn't have the traits to actually lead us in worship in that setting. Because quite frankly, I think there's a ton of great musicians and there's a ton of great singers out there, and you guys have them on your team, I'm sure, and we have some on our team, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a great worship leader. And so we want to find that person that can truly lead in that setting.
That's good. So just a nutshell, what are some of the ways that you've gotten the word out?
So we have, we've used a variety of different ways, really. We have used some of the church job posting websites. I would tell you which ones, but I can't remember off the top of my head which ones we used. And we've gotten some decent response from those. Again, we haven't had it out for too long. And we've got about a half dozen or so applicants so far. And then also on social media, I found some social media groups that you can post job openings. And so I put it out there, and just having resources like you guys. I know I talked to both of you guys saying, hey, if you know anybody that might be interested, or if you know any resources, and that's one of the ways I connected with some of these worship Facebook pages and stuff is through the connections with you guys. So I think personal connections, social media, and different websites is how we've been getting it out.
What have you seen, Clint? How do churches even get the word out to find people? And does it seem like it's, well, yeah, I was just wondering.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting because all of my avenues in ministry roles, either volunteered or paid staff, have been purely relational based. Like it's because I have a relationship with someone, I know them, and like for example, like where I'm at now with Troy, you know, I got on board with the team because of my relationship with like Tim, you, and your dad. You know, so you know, knowing you guys, so you know, networking and making connections, and you know, that's one thing. But then, you know, like Brad said, you know, being a part of like different worship leader groups, like on Facebook, stuff like that. Just for example, people are always looking, you know, wanting to share job, you know, positions and stuff like that. And it also, the really cool thing, even beyond that, for someone who's trying to hire, is you can kind of, you know, put a word out there and just saying, hey, you know, what did you guys ask for when you were going through this hire, or what are some things that you experienced when you were going through a job hire? Because you know, yeah, you know, this was 3 years ago whenever you guys went through that, Brad, with your guy who's leaving. But before that, it was 30 years ago, you know. So it's not like, you know, that, and, you know, it's not like the team there is maybe like over the experience with what's happening, you know. I'm not saying that in a bad way or anything, but, you know, getting other people's insights and, you know, what they have gone through, because I can imagine, just like with anything else, there's some good stories and there's probably some horror stories out there that you can learn from. So
For sure. And to jump on that, I mean, we have Tim right here, who is created a worship leader pipeline with Harvest Ministries. And so that's one of the reasons, one of the first people I reached out to was Tim, to say, hey, I know you've created this pipeline. If you know anybody from the people that you've worked with in years past with Harvest that are interested, because that, for me, even that helps vet the process a little bit, because I know if they've worked with Tim and they've gone through his ministry, that they're reputable in my eyes because of that connection and that relationship. So I think that personal connection is deep for sure as well.
Yeah, that's true. We should use Pipeline for a ministry event of some sort.
There you go. I like that.
An internship program called the Pipeline. That's a good phrase.
You heard it here first, people.
Yeah, we heard it here first. Do you envision somebody being from your regional community, or do you envision somebody coming from farther away? Or
that's a fantastic question. I'm open to whatever. I mean, I know there's great worship leaders around here, and I know that if it's the right time, that I would love to talk to them and see if we can make this a good fit for them and make it a good fit for us. But I will also say that the applications that I've seen so far, every single one of them has been out of state. We haven't had one from this region, let alone this state, that has applied so far. And so, I mean, we've had Texas and Florida and California. I believe one is in North Carolina. I mean, so no one local has applied yet. But I'll also say we're in a unique setting because of all the stuff going on with COVID, where we're not in a rush to hire. It's not like we're saying we have to have somebody today or tomorrow. In fact, we have applications coming in, and we're going to vet those, and we're going to interview those. And when we find the right person, if we find the right person tomorrow, then we'll hire the right person tomorrow. But if it takes until August, I think we're willing to be patient and say, you know what, we'll follow God and God's timing and make sure that we get the right person in that role.
Yeah, you can always use old tapes for the worship services until it.
That's right. Well, and the thing is, our worship team is functioning right now. I mean, they're functioning and they're working together and they're doing a great job. They just after this past Sunday, they don't have that leader with them. But as you guys know, worship services aren't your standard worship service right now, and so they're just a little different, and they look a little different and they feel a little different, and so. Hopefully we can have somebody in place by August and really by the time that we can really get back into some normal-ish gatherings, we can have somebody in that role that'll help us move forward. But we're going to be patient because we don't want to rush into anything and then have a bad fit for someone or have a bad fit for our church, because that's not good for them and it wouldn't be good for us.
Yeah. Andy Stanley always talks about on his podcast about how many hoops people have to jump through to get hired in their organization, and how some people kind of get frustrated with that. And he said even his cousin got upset with him because of that, or something like that. It was like he doesn't, there's no like favorites, because he just knows the importance of, probably more so than the importance of having the right person, is the terribleness of having the wrong person, and how much effort that gets wasted in that. And so a lot of hoops isn't bad.
No.
Well, thanks, Brad, for sharing. O'Fallon is basically a St. Louis metro area church that is in a big growing area of the Metro East. It's also right next to Scott Air Force Base. So there's probably some attraction just for the location of being like a metro area that still has like a nice feel of one high school town and that type of stuff.
Yeah, it's a cool area. It really is. There's I mean, there's some great things and there's some unique things for sure. One of the hardest things for me at our church is our congregation turns over by 30 or 40% every few years because military moves. I mean, so we're constantly getting new people and losing people to military moves, and so it's quite unique. But it's awesome to see those relationships established now and then see them go on into the future. And so I love the community just because it's uniqueness, but like I said, it's got to be the right fit, because there's just like everywhere else, just like Troy, just like St. Jacob, just like anywhere else, there's unique aspects to it for sure. But it's going to be the right fit for somebody, because God's going to call somebody here, and we know that.
Yep. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about that. And what would you say to encourage this might be a different question than hiring a worship leader, but what would you say to encourage churches during all this? Clint or Brad, either one of you guys.
I would say just the fact that we know it's tough. It's tough on everybody. It's tough on every aspect of the ministry. I mean, and I know Clint gets this too. Having little kids running around, like when we're doing this video, all that kind of stuff, worrying about if your dog's barking in the background on Zoom and all those kind of things. But I think that just shows our imperfection, and I think that's okay. I think the church maybe got steered into this idea that we have to be perfect in all that we do all the time, and embracing some of those imperfections and giving those up, and just showing everybody, our congregants and ourselves, our leadership, all that, hey, we're as imperfect as anybody else, and that's why we are the church, and that's why we need to be the church, is because of our imperfections. If we were perfect, we wouldn't need all this, and so we wouldn't need a savior. We wouldn't need a redeemer. We wouldn't need a creator to make us new. We wouldn't need any of these things if we were already perfect. And so
that's good.
And realizing that and moving forward, knowing that God embraces us even through our imperfections, I think is powerful, at least for me at this time, because I've had plenty of imperfect moments on these calls and as a dad and in all different settings and all different situations. So,
I mean, I would totally say something, but I don't know how to follow that.
Yeah, that was like succinct, and it covered all the bases.
Yeah. So, no, but for real though, like for me specifically, for my role at our church, you know, a huge portion of it is in-person stuff, which was not exactly what we're actually able to do right now. And, you know, so talking to our senior pastor about stuff like that, you know, he kind of told me to, you know, keep doing what I'm doing, working with the youth and stuff like that. But actually to rest a little bit from the busyness of, you know, church life before that. And kind of made me think of how sometimes we need to rest because once this is over, you know, people are going to be starving for that community, and we're going to be back out there with our congregations full force soon enough. So, you know, it's only a season. Just keep praying and leaning into God, and loving the people that he's put you in charge of. So
Yeah, that's good. That's pretty cool. Well, and there's also a lot to vulnerability, because seeing everybody's homes and boxes behind them while they're on Zoom meetings, and just stuff.
A tree in the background.
I have my wife's a photographer, and I have a backdrop behind me and a fake tree. Like, how superficial is that? So you don't see my messy basement.
Well, there's a lot of people that have, sometimes people try hard to make it seem like it's not as polished. Like, they'll spend money to do things that are high quality but look unpolished, and just the way people edit and the way people just do things. I mean, it's unbelievable. So there's a lot of truth in the church just being real. And if you just wait for Sunday mornings for an hour, it's hard to be real in an hour. And then you do all this other stuff, and then all of a sudden everybody catches on a different way. So, well, that's cool. We'll pray for your church, Brad, and pray for all these, churches that are looking for people in this season, or pastors who are transitioning to new churches in this season. That's got to be really crazy.
Yeah.
And we'll also pray for worship leaders in general, just because, there's probably just going to be a lot of shakeups here one of these days along the lines of this COVID thing. And who knows, worship ministry might be one of the things that you look at and say, oh man, we got to have that, whether you're meeting in person or online. That's like a component that's, an anchor sort of. But just churches in general with their staff, if things keep staying so flux, it's going to be hard to keep it going. So we'll pray for all those things. Well, thanks for joining in on the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast, Brad. And Clint, thanks for joining us. And we're going to see how this conversation might help encourage other worship leaders, other churches, and continue moving on. So thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Talk to you later on.